Hey, welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Caleb Teskey, coming at you with an early interview today. Normally, I've been trying to do around 7, so everyone's home from work, but I got a request for a early jam today, and request granted. I want to thank everybody who tuned into the other ones. Boy, I had a really great interview here with Eric Kafka from Spring Your Way, talking about his lab over there and chemistry that's way over my head. If you guys haven't checked out the interview I did with Lars Olofsson, who's exposing some of this investment scam over in Europe, the Juicy Field stuff, that was a really good one too. And I want to, since she hit me up this morning, I want to send another shout out to Marguerite Edelman from the Vermont PFAS and Military Poisons Coalition. That was another fantastic interview there. And we got a bunch of good ones coming up. I got Mr. Z's. I got Joe Veldon from Seven Leaf. I got Alex Grosser as a medical patient. I got Shannon O'Brien from the Massachusetts Cannabis Control Commission next Thursday. I got Miguel Lopez coming back. I got Dan Pomerantz coming back. We got Brendan Bigfoot. I'm psyched to have him on. Dr. Anna Schwabe. And we got Carly Bader from Willow Industries, one of these remediation companies. And that should be super interesting. Anyway, got another great guest for you today. She reached out to me on LinkedIn, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and wanted to talk to me about a story. And I was, compelled to bring her on the show. So let's just bring her up. It's Cate Orman. Cate, is it Orman? Orman. Orman. Okay.
Close enough.
Cool. Thanks for being here with me, Cate, and thank you for reaching out.
For sure. Thanks for having me on your show. This isn't a particularly easy topic to talk about, but it's something that I think is really important that I continue to talk about and continue to get out there. Because what happened to me could happen to anyone working in a dispensary. And quite honestly, the current way things are set up just doesn't protect employees. So
before we get into anything serious, would you mind sharing with us a 5-minute life story?
Sure. Like a fun one?
I mean, hey, however you like to tell it.
Sorry, you want me to share like what happened?
Yeah, tell us where you're from, where you grew up, where you go to college, and then we'll get into that stuff.
Okay, just like a run through of my life. I gotcha.
Yeah.
So I'm Cate. I am from Texas originally. Born the same year the endocannabinoid system was discovered, which is something kind of fun I like to share because I feel like I sort of grew up with cannabis science in a sense. I was a 90s kid, so I definitely, went to school, did the whole dare, cannabis will ruin your life messaging. I actually ran my high school's like anti-drug committee, which is really kind of ironic now. Tried cannabis for the first time in college. Was gonna just try it once and was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Attended Texas A&M. I studied actually poultry science, so I get to spend every interview for the rest of my life explaining that I have a degree in chickens, which is kind of fun. But didn't want to work with chickens, didn't really know what to do, ended up in the cannabis space. Kind of a great combination for pre-med, pre-vet, as well as agriculture. So kind of just put that right into the cannabis space. I worked for Grassroots for a little bit, back before they were bought out by Curaleaf. Sorry. I worked in their post-processing lab, did a little bit of early R&D, some like beverage, tablet, gummy stuff. Ultimately, just didn't really see eye to eye with the company. Ended up leaving. I started my own company very briefly, Maryland Cannabis Events. We did like social media marketing. Our big thing was creating a monthly calendar where we would put all the events for patients in one place. So you could just go to our site or to my Instagram and it would show, here's everything, patients can do in Maryland this weekend related to cannabis. So like if you wanted to, find a social outing or somewhere you could go learn about cannabis or somewhere you could go get signed up for your medical card, you could just kind of go to one place and see all the places all over the state that would, have something going on that week or weekend. It was a really fun business, wasn't really making any money, sold it to my business partner. That's when I started working at Rise. unfortunately, that's kind of what I'm here to talk about today is some of my less than delightful experiences at Rise. After I left Rise, I actually worked at Darigold for a little bit. I was always a big fan of milk, so ended up in the milk factory and somehow ended up overseeing an EHS department. So I got to learn a lot about OSHA regulations, and just really started to realize how lacking a lot of that is in the cannabis space, which I
Is that
guess
like employee health and safety or something?
yes,
EHS. Yeah. Okay.
environmental health and safety.
Okay. Hmm.
Although truthfully, I mostly was focused on the safety and health at the plant I was at.
Hmm. And you mentioned something on the phone that I wanted to just stop you on before we get too far into this. You said maybe you just had become maybe bored by some of the traditional routes of like science, academia, maybe.
For sure. I mean, as you know, a young scientist in my undergrad, it's like most any topic you look at, it's kind of like, okay, someone's researched this and then someone's, broken it down 3 levels further. Not that there aren't, still amazing discoveries to be made in every scientific field, but how many fields out there are there where there just was no research for almost 70 years? So, I mean, I think cannabis
Mhm.
offers just like a really unique opportunity for young scientists because here's something that, we maybe kind of know what some of it does, but we also really don't. Like, there's a lot to study, there's a lot to prove, there's a lot to understand. And I'm not sure there's really any other topic that we just, haven't done research on for 70 years, which I think makes cannabis really unique and interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting point for sure. And when I was just racking my brain trying to think of that, like, oh, yeah, maybe like psychedelics or something would
I
fit
guess
into that category. But yeah.
similar, but,
Hmm. So you mentioned these two dispensaries you worked at. Where was the first one at? Grassroots. Where's that at? I've never heard of that before.
So Grassroots was actually a processing facility. I was
Ah,
working in their post-processing lab and doing R&D primarily there. Both were in Maryland. So Grassroots was this little tiny town way up in northern Maryland called Tawnytown, uh, like 15 minutes from the PA border, about an hour from Baltimore. Kind of a boring little town, but had this big Grassroots production facility. I lived out there for, I guess, about a year.
and this is just in Maryland. Are we? This is just medical, I'm guessing.
It was medical only when I moved out there. I
Right.
got to Maryland in like 2018, left in 2021 before they finally passed rec. Maryland is now recreational, but that is recent since I have left the state, unfortunately.
Hmm. Yeah, I was
It
just I had a guy on Devin Ledford who's down there who I think was talking about that a little bit.
For sure. It's an exciting space for MSOs right now. They're kind of making back their losses in other states. So everyone loves Maryland right now. It's one of the few places you can still peddle $60 eighths and people buy it.
I've seen a few of them floating around Vermont.
There's a couple of states, I guess, that are guilty.
Uh,
Maryland just got home grow, which is the wildest thing. They had medical for all those years, but they wouldn't let anyone grow. So to me, that's been the big I guess, positive change with Maryland rec. Of
hmm.
course, I had already been in Oregon with plants for a year when that happened, so I kind of missed out on the Maryland grow scene, but it
Oh no.
happens.
uh, yeah. Boy, some of these states are super interesting to learn about, just to see how they kind of differ from Vermont and all the different kind of see what's similar and what's different. And it seems like, yeah, the medical program is always a little slow. Ours is struggling right now badly. The patient count just keeps going down. The products aren't really that great. Um, yeah, it's a bit of a shit show.
I feel like everyone's program kind of is. Maryland, for some reason, seems to think they have one of the better programs in the country, but from what I can see, no one has a particularly good program. Oregon's not great either. I definitely prefer the Oregon industry because it's more of a free market, but, everyone out here will tell you they're not making any money, so,
Sure.
it's
I just
great.
had a friend. I had a guy on a couple months ago, and he was in Oregon and just decided to pick up and move to Montana because it's such a shit show in Oregon.
Yeah, I believe it.
Mm.
So
So in between, so there's the Grassroots, and then you said you went to this other place, Rise.
yes, that's
How,
the dispensary.
so when did you start working at Rise?
So I started at Rise, it would have been the very end of 2019. I sold my company, Maryland Cannabis Events, got a job as a patient care specialist at Rise. I think I was in that role maybe like 8 months, and then I was promoted to a shift supervisor, which I did for about, I think, a month and a half. I loved working at the dispensary. I really loved interacting with patients, especially once I started grad school and I could kind of, take what I was learning in class and then come to work and use that to just give patients an even better experience. Say, hey, here's an article. I know exactly why this works this way for you. And, obviously, not everyone wants to hear in depth science, but just, knowing, I guess, that extra stuff that I could teach people. It was overall a pretty good setup, until the place was robbed and someone came in my job and attacked me. And that just kind of ruined that.
So let me ask you a few lead up questions here. What's the size of this place, Rise? Like, how many employees do you have? Is it like a massive facility?
So our dispensary was on the smaller side. We had about maybe 15 to 18 employees, of which, maybe anywhere from 3 to 5, 8 would be on a shift at a time. It was definitely a smaller building. But at the time, we were the busiest Rise location in the state out of 3 locations total. And we were part of a bigger dispensary chain. So, like, there's 3 Rise stores, and there's multiple Rise stores, I guess, throughout the country. Just 3 in Maryland. But our actual shop itself, I guess, wasn't all that big, but definitely pretty high traffic. I mean, patients in and out, even with COVID, that obviously just made things pick up.
Now, did you guys have a cultivation facility as well, or is it just a dispensary?
Yes, GTI is vertically integrated in Maryland. I believe in most states they're in. Our grow, I believe, was like 2.5 hours away over on the Maryland Eastern Shore. So we had the whole grow process facility, a line of products, all that shabam.
But it's not all in one building. You got the grow over here. You got the dispensary. Okay.
Yeah, the grow was several hours away. Well, I
Hmm.
guess depending on the traffic, but going over the Bay Bridge always took me at least 2 hours. So
Damn. Okay. Now, is there any like backstory here before this incident? How long had you been working there when this incident went down?
So I'd been there for a while. Like I said, long enough that I had gotten promoted. I guess by the time that happened, I had maybe been there over a year, like a year and some odd months, maybe about a year and a half. Um, Basically, I got promoted, and I got promoted over another coworker, who I didn't think held any hostility about it, but I may never know. I wasn't really getting paid very well, so I basically decided to move into a room that 2 of my coworkers were renting and offered me. One of whom was my co-supervisor that was training me for my new role. The other, which was another dispensary employee who was her lifelong best friend. They lived together along with her fiance. They had a little like room in their basement. They offered to rent me. I had been spending, an arm and a leg for like a 1-bedroom apartment by myself, and I was restarting grad school, and I thought, oh, it would be so nice, to have some roommates. I've known these people for like a year. I should feel pretty safe living with them. So I moved in, I lived there for a few months. Things got pretty tense and unpleasant there fairly quickly. The one girl who was my co-supervisor's fiance just like did not like me at all. And they kind of turned on me and I was like, okay, whatever. Like I'll move out. Let's just, keep this out of work because, that's the last thing I wanted. Um, so I make all my plans to move out. And the day before I left, one of the people I worked with assaulted me as I was trying to basically get back into the house and get into my room. I came home from, a long week of work and she's, standing in front of my door, blocking my bedroom door, won't let me into my room. Basically becomes very hostile and angry at me that I've put a lock on my bathroom door that was a private bathroom I didn't share because I felt unsafe, was why I put on the lock. And I'm just like, I'm moving out tomorrow at 9 a.m. Like, just let me in my room. It did not work for her. Ended up getting physical. She's like twice my size and a black belt. So it just like really was not a fair fight. I was just trying to like get in my room and she's just like, smashing me into the ground. I got away, called the police. My shoulder was like dislocated and I was holding a can of Arizona green tea when this happened. So the can got smushed and that can was just like really sharp if you've ever like smushed a can. So it just basically sliced my hand open, which wasn't a very deep wound, but it was just really annoying. It like kept coming back open and rebleeding. So I was in like a sling for about a week. I had my hand, all bandaged up that kept, coming unbandaged and bleeding at work. I told my managers this had happened. I pressed police, like I said, I called the cops right when it happened. I, filed a report, pressed charges. I was trying to be as, diplomatic as I could about it because I knew I still worked with this person. I basically went to, my bosses who were the GM and the AGM of the store and said, this happened and, I'm pressing charges for my own, feeling of safety and I need you to be aware of this. And it was just kind of ignored, brushed under the rug, and honestly felt kind of like they believed somehow that I had been the aggressor in that, even though, like I said, she's like twice my size and has a background in martial art. So it's like, why would I ever choose to fight someone that I know I can't win against? And she was in front of my bedroom door. But, our GM basically had opened up the shop with her and with my other co-supervisors.
So they had like tenure, basically. They'd been there longer than you.
They had been there a couple years longer than me, and they had opened the store with our GM. So I feel like he was just kind of inclined to believe their word over mine, especially because it was two of them, even though, one of them had clearly assaulted me and charges were being filed and addressed and taken to court. It was kind of like at each step of the way, I would send, management a letter saying, oh, this is going to trial in 2 weeks. I want to make you aware of this in case it causes any, issues at work, because unfortunately they could never drop the incident and were, hostile to me at work kind of honestly before the assault even happened. Like while I was trying to move out, these people were already, kind of just finding ways to, bother and make my workday unpleasant. Corner me at work and yell at me about stuff related to the house, stuff like that. And my boss even saw some of that, but just kind of kept saying he was remaining neutral by sort of just ignoring what they were doing, which to me was not really neutral. But so I mean, to me, I saw there was a threat. I feel like I kept, warning that these people were possibly going to do something to me, and everyone just kind of didn't say anything. So when the guy broke into the dispensary, he got in with not the woman who assaulted me, but the other roommate who was my co-supervisor. It was her badge that he used to gain access. Um,
So you have like electronic key cards,
yeah,
and okay, and all the employees have those.
yes. So, I had often thought about, being at risk when I left the building, walked to my car at night. I had pepper spray I would carry then. I was always on alert, but I guess it had just never occurred to me that someone would burst into the building with an access badge.
Now, do you guys have any type of security on the premises?
In theory, yes. At the time, we had one unarmed security guard that would be there during the day. Um, I would hope maybe changes have been made since then. After the robbery, the only change was that the security guard stayed until everyone left at night because for some dumb reason, up until the robbery, it was normal practice for the security guard basically to leave with all the bud tenders at the end of the night, but leave the manager or supervisor who was there, just alone in the shop with no security, but like hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash and product, which
So
is
they just
pretty
leave you
much
hanging out.
it.
Everybody else would go home for the night, and you be left alone.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happened in this instance. Security walked out, and about 20 minutes later, someone walked right in. Um,
Do you want to walk us through exactly what happened? You said they came in with the key card, but if you'd like, just walk us through it as much as you're comfortable with here.
yeah, so basically, felt like, a normal night of closing up the shop. It was actually my first day of grad school classes. I remember that very clearly. I was super excited to kind of wrap up and go home and, view my grad school class and see what was going to go down. So I was just kind of closing up, thinking about that, just, normal, ordinary day. I had to work with the employee that had physically assaulted me, that night. That was something I had asked, I'd rather not be in the shop alone with her. I really don't feel safe. Yet that night, she was, mysteriously the last one to leave the building. As I was closing up, I kind of had to, go check everyone's side duties, make sure that they had, done everything they were supposed to do before they went home. She was supposed to clean the bathroom. She was in there for about 30, 40 minutes. And when she came out, I had to send another employee in there to clean the bathroom because nothing had been done. I thought that was kind of odd at the time, but, she was just actively defiant and insubordinate, and I was still expected to be her supervisor for some reason. So, I kind of just brushed that off as her trying to make my night more difficult, didn't think a ton of it, but in retrospect, very fishy. All the employees went home. Like I said, security guard went home. I was just doing my normal nightly closing duties, one of which was counting the money we'd made for the day. So I was in the back office, and it's the really weird part. I had a lot of cash with me in the office. I mean, it wasn't a very busy day for the dispensary, but I was still counting what I remember to be about $14,000 in cash. So, a substantial amount of cash that the average person would, walk in, see, just take that and leave. So remember that because that's kind of weird to me. Anyways, I'm sitting there counting money. There was a slight discrepancy in one of the drawers, so I went back to recount something, was pretty focused on that. I heard a badge click, which there made like a little beep noise when the door opened. I should have realized it was late because none of the employee badges were supposed to open the door after 8:30. So I guess that should have rung an alarm, but honestly just didn't cross my mind. My first thought was, someone forgot something in their locker. It's one of the employees just came back to grab something. I was in my head preparing to get up and go check on what the noise was, but, kind of just finishing counting the stack of money I had first before I ever had a chance to leave the office. The man came into the office, though. So then I very quickly realized it wasn't an employee that had come back. Kind of my first thought was just shock. Like I saw, this man and I remember correctly, he was wearing like black or camo or something. Like, I kind of thought maybe it was a federal raid or something. I'd been trained a lot more extensively on how to respond to that than a robbery. So my first thought was like, why does this guy have a badge? Is he law enforcement? Like, what's he doing here? How did he get in? I was just, very confused that he was in the space and had somehow been able to access it. So I think I was just kind of, in shock and just sort of trying to figure out how to respond. He kind of grabs me and just, says, come with me, and starts kind of guiding me out of the office, leaving all the money I was counting on the desk, which, like I said, makes 0 sense.
Yeah, that
Like,
seems
he
odd.
knew something. He had to have known something, or why would he not have just taken $14,000 and left? I mean, that's a pretty good haul for most places. Um, So he kind of just, was guiding me along. But at that point, he wasn't, being aggressive. And, my thought was just, cooperate, give him what he wants, let him out of here. You got to do what you got to do to get out of the safe. So I was just kind of following him, trying to do, assess the situation and figure out what to do. I kept trying to think about panic buttons and figure out where one of those was and press a panic button. As it turns out, I later realized there was one in the office. I don't know if I could or couldn't have pressed it. It honestly was like up on the wall, where there wasn't really a way to press it without him seeing me. But at the time, I just could only remember the location of one panic button, and I couldn't get to it. And in my head, I am, thinking I'm here in this dispensary alone. The attack happened just a couple minutes after I sent out our nightly closing email that went to the whole management crew, including the girl whose badge he used to come in. Uh, so that timing was a little weird too. But because I had just sent out that email, I was thinking everyone thinks I'm gone for the night. No one, is even going to know I'm still in this shop. I couldn't find a panic button, like,
Oh,
to trigger it. I didn't know that anyone was gonna rescue me, or that anyone knew at all the situation I was in, which I think, it turns out that wasn't the case, but that just added kind of a whole extra level of, like, no one is coming, no one knows I'm here. I already sent out the email because my boss would kinda check on me sometimes if that email went out late, but I'm thinking, the email just went out, everyone's gonna think I'm fine. How long is it going to take them to realize, I'm here and this has happened?
and did you say the panic button was like up on a wall somewhere?
There were a number of panic buttons. Some of them were down like under the, like sales floor registers and stuff. There was one in the office, but yeah, that one was like up on a wall, which seems like it would have been much better placed under the desk where I maybe could have actually hit it. Then again, practical like training and drills and stuff like that may have made that apparent, which is why, that's the kind of thing I'm pushing for now. I basically had no, preparation or, I kind of just survived, I guess, by sheer luck and, my own know how, not by any preparation of knowing where, the tools I needed were, or having them for that matter.
And you said they trained you for like a federal raid or like a police raid, but not for robbery.
As far as I remember, I mean, there may have been like a PowerPoint slide in my onboarding training. But I don't remember us ever having an emergency action plan, which, is definitely an OSHA requirement that I think a lot of cannabis companies are just flat out ignoring. We actually had an employee that left and was threatening to call OSHA over some COVID complaints. And I remember our dispensary managers like laughing about how OSHA doesn't do anything in the cannabis industry. So, I mean, that's why they don't have emergency action plans, and they don't, have any training or procedures in place for employees for stuff like this. Or if they did, like, I know I was shown the panic buttons once, but it was like, welcome to the company. Here's a PowerPoint about federal raids and maybe robberies. And like, here's where some buttons are located. But, a year and a half later, I didn't necessarily remember that information. Like,
Mm,
most safety professionals are going to recommend not only that you have an emergency action plan, but like you should be retraining people on it annually. And really, with what a big, concern robberies are for these kinds of businesses, you should be running drills. You should be, preparing for every variation, armed versus unarmed, during hours, after hours. Like, those
mm,
are all situations that dispensary staff should be prepared for. Is knowing where those buttons are, knowing where to hide, like that could make the difference between someone surviving this or not.
mm,
And it's ridiculous that companies aren't, doing their due diligence considering the danger when you have that amount of cash and, quite honestly, valuable resellable product.
mm. And I want to, real quick, I want to pop up the story here. I got a couple. I think this might be the one. This is the Outlaw Report. I don't know what that is, but
Yeah.
here's a little story. I believe is Rise and Joppa, right? This is the one.
Yes.
Okay, and I want to pop up the other one too because also it looks like you got a little traction here from MJ Biz Daily, and I just want to pop that story up there real quick in case anybody wants to go check this out. More cash, more headaches for marijuana retailers after MasterCard ban, and it's by Chris Kasakia from MJ Biz. You can find the story if you guys are curious there. And so, can you tell me a little bit? How did you end up getting in touch with MJ Biz? I assume this must have got some traction if they picked it up.
Basically kind of same way I got in touch with you, just sort of started speaking out on LinkedIn. It was something that I hadn't really talked about a lot, and I started actually restarted grad school, was looking at some like I had to do some essays, and a lot of the topics that I had to listen to guest lectures and write about for those essays were actually about, advocacy and what an important driving force it is in the cannabis industry. And I guess what everyone kind of kept saying in that really stuck with me was just, you can make these changes, but you got to just be relentless. And you got to just kind of keep, pushing the issue till you get change. And I kind of started realizing, there may not be anyone else that cares enough about this to, really change this. But, this is something that's affected my life so deeply, and it was, so preventable. And I think it's so important to, speak out about this because someone else could not go through the experience I did. Someone else could have a security guard there, or, at least know where the freaking panic button is. So, I think it's important that this gets talked about. And I kind of think actually maybe Chris found me specifically from a comment I'd left on Ben Kovler's page. I got a little mad when he started posting about how employee safety is their priority recently. I was like, oh, that's very interesting. Is that a new policy? Because it wasn't my experience. But
And didn't someone recently die at a GTI factory in Illinois or something?
yeah, that's my
Some
understanding. I can't remember what state it was. Maybe it was Illinois. Thought it
somewhere out there.
was it's but yeah, there was a recent GTI death that I don't know a ton of details about, but they definitely did have some coverage with that. So
I got a comment here from Alvin Jones Jr. I don't know if this is a guy you know, but he says hello. Hey, Alvin, thanks for tuning in. Yeah, and I also saw Ben Kovler's post about employee safety. I'm like, yeah, you got one of them just died. Like
yeah.
I'm still trying to figure out how you kill someone in a weed factory. I assume it's maybe environmental controls or something like that. But man,
My understanding is it's the cannabis dust. When I worked at Grassroots, I actually had a computer that got ruined by just getting so much keef stuck in it. So
no shit.
that's a topic I've been wanting to do some research into myself. But from what I can tell, it sounds like cannabis dust inhalation is definitely
Yeah, or maybe I've also heard pesticides suggested, which you would also be breathing in from that, or maybe a lot of mold. So yeah, I'd definitely like to learn a little more about that. Can I ask you real quick? I want to back this up. After this robbery goes down, you said the guy didn't take the money? Did he come
Oh
back
no,
for the
he took
money
it.
or? Okay.
Yeah, I guess I never finished. I got sidetracked. Basically, he took me to the bathroom. I cooperated up to that point just because, I was hoping I could get out of the whole thing unharmed. We got to the bathroom. He basically demanded I take my pants off. I was like, oh, okay, that's a change of, where this is going. Obviously was not into that. So I told him no. At that point, he started pretty much trying to knock me unconscious from what I can tell. He was basically grabbing me and hitting me into the wall as hard as he could so that, he thought my head was gonna, I guess, hit the wall and I was gonna fall over. I don't know. That didn't work. I am more athletic than I look. I played tennis and lacrosse growing up. And I guess somewhere in my head, I knew I had to stay on my feet. Like, I just kept telling myself, I cannot get on the ground. Like, as long as I can, stay on my feet and block him with my hands, I have a fighting chance. So I just, stayed on my feet and he grabbed a metal trash can lid. We had like a big metal trash can in the bathroom with like a circular lid, and he grabbed that lid and just started like hitting me in the head with that lid. Again, I can only presume he was, trying to knock me out. I was able to kind of block that. My hand was really badly bruised up, miraculously not broken, but I was, I guess luckily able to block a lot of his shots with my hand. I had like a black eye. I guess he got a couple hits in, but I stayed up. I didn't fall to the ground. As you can see, I actually suffer from a little bit of hair loss. I've had alopecia for, I guess, like 6 or 7 years now. I used to wear wigs pretty regularly, and at the time this happened, I was wearing a wig. So I guess that was maybe, in a way, my saving grace. He went to like grab me by my wig and, didn't realize it was not real hair. And so when he grabbed my wig, the wig just came off, and I was able to basically turn around and get a couple shots, just in my fingers or with my fingers, just like in his eye. Um, didn't really hurt him too bad, which I guess is probably my big regret.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I was able,
bummer. I was gonna say bummer.
like, honestly, if I could have just made him bleed, maybe they would have caught him. But, I at least got him in the eyes a couple times. I guess, most people that try to do things like that are also kind of cowards. He didn't really like, getting hit back. At that point, he pretty much told me to stay in the bathroom, and if I tried to come out, he would shoot me. I don't know that he had a gun. I never saw a gun, but he definitely, told me he had one and would shoot me. So I waited, in the bathroom for a minute before I ran out, just in case. But after a minute, I also, thought I was there and potentially no one knew I was there and no one was going to help me. So I grabbed the actually bathroom cleaner was the only thing I could think of to use as a weapon. We had like a spray bottle of Clorox, and I was like, if nothing else, I can spray it in his face. I know he doesn't like me going for his eyes. So I grabbed that and ran out and hit the panic button. I knew where it was, and grabbed the, dispensary phone and called 911. By that point, I believe he was already gone. From what I can tell, he basically left the bathroom, like ran out, broke a display, and somehow knew to go like right to the vault, grab the money and leave, which was just really weird. I didn't find out he had actually taken money until I think like a good maybe week or so later. But I know he did take money out of the vault now.
So what happened? The panic button, I assume that goes to the police, and then you called 911, and did they respond to the scene, I assume?
So they did. The police showed up. It turns out they were actually already responding to the scene, which I didn't realize until later, because the young lady whose badge they used basically had called and reported her badge stolen about 30 minutes before the robbery. And so our GM and district manager were both watching the cameras and on the phone with the police by the time it happens. Which, I obviously didn't know, and no one could be bothered to, like, shoot me a quick text message and say, hey, hide or anything.
Oh, so they got this report of the stolen card, so they were looking at that, and the robbery goes down. Well, they're already starting to look at that.
Yes.
Wow.
And it's very weird because she lived about 30 minutes away from the dispensary. This guy supposedly stole her card and seemingly immediately drove 30 minutes to rob the place. If you look at the actual dispensary badges, which I don't have mine anymore, but I'm sure I could dig up a picture. They basically, because of the way like cannabis licensing works, I'm sure you're probably somewhat aware, like all these MSOs will have like a million different shell companies that'll a lot of the times be listed. It's like the owner of, one dispensary or another. So our badges didn't say Rise on them. Nowhere on them did they say Rise or anything, quite honestly, that would have indicated what dispensary they belonged to anyone that didn't work there,
So,
really.
like, if I stole it from you, I wouldn't know where to go, even if I
Our
want. There's no defining like mark on there, huh?
I mean, it has like your name, your picture, but it just said at the top, Me Shall LLC, which was like a sub company that GTI had the dispensary under, I guess. It wasn't, our badges didn't say Rise.
So
So,
you'd have to be familiar with the structure of the business to know what
yeah,
that company was. Wow.
I mean,
Boy.
honestly, I don't know how you would ever know what Michelle was if you didn't work for the company and you hadn't either seen it on a paycheck or, on your badge. I guess maybe some of our patients that came in regularly could have seen it on our badges, but, how often do you read the bud tender's badge when you go into a dispensary and memorize details from it?
Yeah, that seems like probably a less likely scenario that
Um,
a patient would have like sniped it off your badge. Like, go home and Google, hey, what's Michelle? Like,
Right, and it also
hmm.
was not the closest dispensary, like, it was a good 30 minutes away, and she was in, like, Parkville, Maryland, this was Joppatown, Maryland, like, you probably passed, 5, 6 other, dispensaries before,
No
you could
shit.
get to this one, so, like, clearly, if he stole this badge, he knew exactly what it was, and, they tried to sell some story this guy had been like outside their house stalking them or something, but that's also suspicious because like I said, there were two GTI employees that lived there, the co-supervisor whose badge was used, and then the other employee who was just like a bud tender, who was the one that assaulted me. So they both had badges. Basically, the way it was set up, only the management and supervisor badges would give you access to the building after 8:30. So one of those badges you could get in the building after 8:30, the other one you couldn't. The robbery happened at 8:50 and they just happened to time it where they took the right badge. I mean,
And you also said it was like right after you sent your like closing email, like, hey, I'm shutting it down for the night.
which I know for a fact that the girl whose badge was used, like when I lived with her, she was really neurotic about reading those emails every night. Like the nights I would close, I would write my closing email, leave, kind of not think about it, and I would get home and she would be like asking me questions about the email I had sent, like 30 minutes before, and I'd be like, "You're off work today. Like, don't you have something else to think about?" So it's not at all far fetched. Anyone that worked with her would probably tell you she was like checking those emails. Um, so I don't know. It's been 2 years, nothing's been proved, and I think that's absolutely wild. And that's a lot of what keeps me awake at night. They eventually, my co-supervisor whose badge was used was let go from GTI. But the robbery happened in March. That didn't happen till like July. And my understanding is she works at another dispensary now. So, and my coworker that assaulted me still works at GTI, I'm pretty sure. So,
And I've also, worth noting is that if I recall, the GTI workers were striking not too long ago. I don't know if that's still going on, but it sounds like, employees being sort of not treated very well at work is maybe a bit of a common theme at GTI.
I would believe that.
And
Honestly,
you said they didn't pay super well either. Did you say that earlier?
I was making $16 an hour when this happened to me.
As
So,
a supervisor?
yeah, my earning potential basically doubled when I left GTI, which is why it's been a little hard for me to get back into cannabis. Low pay seems to be kind of an industry norm, but
That's
yeah.
crazy. McDonald's over there starts at 18
Oh,
here
I
in Vermont.
know. And if you're literally in a building with, several $100,000 in cash, which makes it a very high risk position, they should, pay accordingly for those risks, but they don't. They want to pay even less because somehow the cool factor of being around weed is supposed to make up for it, I guess. I don't know. Um, but, the sad thing is, all things considered, I actually was fairly happy at GTI. Now I see I was underpaid and, a lot of other issues, but I probably would have stayed there for years and, continued to be the most loyal, dedicated employee had this not happened to me. I tried to stay a good year after this did happen because at the time I really wanted to get back into R&D and get into their research lab, and I, saw it as an opportunity and, thought that they would see value in me, especially after I, stuck around after something like this had happened. And a lot of our staff quit after that because they felt,
Really?
oh yeah, we had 3, 4, 5 people leave. A lot of people felt really uncomfortable that they thought my co-supervisor was behind the whole thing. Like I said, she stayed there till July, so a lot of people were not happy with that and didn't feel safe and didn't feel like they basically did anything to address the robbery. And I should have been, the most upset and the most vocal. But at the time, I thought if I was just, quiet, kept my head down, did, what the company wanted me to do, that would, have some benefit for me in the end. And instead, they kind of just let me sit there for a year and drive myself mad while they refused to help me get out of that shop. I basically spent a year requesting transfers because I had to work in the same location where I was attacked, as well as with an employee that had assaulted me several months before that, and was continuing to be openly hostile and threatening to me on pretty much an ongoing weekly basis. I was, reporting to my manager, reporting to HR, like I, was not comfortable with this person at work and they were kind of continuing to harass me. And I was, her supervisor, which put me in even more of an uncomfortable position because she basically just did what she wanted and told me to, go F myself. And I wasn't allowed to like write her up or do anything about it because my GM was on her side pretty much. Anything I would report would just be him having a brief chat with her and then it was forgotten. Um, Not to mention the shop only had one bathroom. So I basically had to, revisit the site of this trauma every time I had to go to the bathroom. And
Oh, awesome.
yeah, I actually left and went to the like sheets down the street to go to the bathroom for about a month and a half after this happened. Finally, that just became too inconvenient, but they just like would not transfer me to another shop. HR basically kept kind of telling me, you just have to apply for other jobs and just wait for us to accept you for another position.
I
And
did
I kind
see some of those. You sent me a bunch of text messages and stuff, and I did see it in there talking about, hey man, I was gonna hang on here and like stick this out. Which seems, boy, it's got to be stressful. You're working in a place where you were assaulted. You got one of your coworkers who also assaulted you. People are leaving because they're afraid that something bad might happen. You got lackadaisical security, it sounds like. I mean, that's just that sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I mean, it was really wearing on my mental health. I felt like I was still potentially working with someone that was behind what had happened. I didn't feel like, security had really improved that much. They tried to be like, oh, we made, all these changes, and there were a couple useful changes made, but at the end of the day, they still had one unarmed security guard. And for some reason, they had a real talent for hiring security guards who like to sleep on the job. Like before the robbery, we had this guard that like it was kind of a running joke with like the dispensary staff and even all of our patients. Like he would just constantly be sitting outside just like asleep, like snoring, like we would all make jokes of it. But even after the robbery, they hired a guy who was otherwise an okay guard, but would in the mornings while we were opening up, which is probably one of the times we're the most vulnerable, he would just be like sitting out in his car, and a lot of the times he would fall asleep in his car, and I would have to go wake him up as the opening supervisor. Hey, can you get out of your car and come in? We're opening now, and we need a security guard.
Could you fucking do your job?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of important to me at that point that he did his job. So,
I mean, what's the point of hiring security if they're fucking sleeping in the parking lot?
yeah, like banks have actual security. Dispensaries have hundreds of thousands in cash and product. They should have something, more on par with bank security, not, one guy puffing on a vape in the parking lot. That's, not really going to do a lot for anyone.
I want to slap this up real quick because you made a beautiful thumbnail for this, and I like to do shameless plugs in the middle, but we've got Cate Orman here, former GTI employee, occupational safety in the cannabis industry, certified Ganjier, cannabis science. Thank you for making that, by the way. That looks super
Sure.
nice.
Thank you.
So let me ask you this. You said that after this robbery, they did change a couple little things. What were those couple little things that they changed?
The main thing I remember being is just access to the building at the time. You literally just walked up with like a fob card, scanned the fob card, and you were in the building. Like I said, certain fobs didn't work after 8:30. You had to have like a management fob to get in at the time that the robbery occurred. But after the robbery, they added where you also had to like enter a code to get in.
Oh, so
So it's
extra
frustrating.
extra layer of security.
Yeah. I mean, still not maybe that foolproof, but I guess it would have taken away my coworker's excuse of, oh, someone just took my badge and ran over here with it and committed this crime.
Okay,
Because if they had also known her number, maybe it would have been a little easier, I guess, to.
fair
Um,
point.
so maybe not the worst change, but, doesn't really do a lot to actually keep anyone safe, really. I mean, they could have just as easily been waiting outside the doors to ambush me, which was something that came up in the robbery. They basically said the lighting in the parking lot was bad and they couldn't see what direction the guy had gone, what car he had or hadn't gotten into, which is particularly frustrating to me because they did add extra security lights in the parking lot a couple months after the robbery. Um, so I think that they got added in maybe like June, I can't remember, something like that. I had brought up in that December preceding the March robbery that patients and employees alike were both basically complaining the parking lot was ill lit and it was dangerous. Um, so, they were aware of that. And I have that in writing, but
No shit.
ended up, being something that wasn't addressed until unfortunately it potentially, led to this guy not getting caught as fast as.
Yeah, and so there's I assume they must at least have like a couple cameras looking out there, but what, the cameras, the lighting was so bad they couldn't see the car or anything like that?
I guess. I mean, truthfully, I don't know a ton of details. I just know bits and pieces that I've heard either, from the, I guess, police or from, other, I guess, GTI employees at the time. But I mean, from what I can tell, they definitely had issues with, the parking lot lighting. They seem to have pictures of him inside the dispensary. I know he was wearing a mask because it was during COVID. But that's one thing that has really been astounding to me is like they clearly had this guy on camera. How have they not caught him? Like it can't be that difficult to, surely they can tell enough from what they have on camera.
Have you asked them to see the footage or done a public records request? I don't even know if that would fall under that, but
It's
man,
still an open case. That's something I need to follow up and just see if I can get kind of any additional information. But for the most part, there hasn't been much information I can access because it's still an open investigation. Which I guess is, maybe the selfish reason I'm speaking out on, super awesome save humanity type of level. I want to protect others, get good laws. Maybe in a little bit of a selfish way, I just want this crime solved too. It's been 2 years and it's kind of wild to me that, it still hasn't been solved. And I kind of keep hoping, the right person will see this and be like, oh, I know that guy. Or be like, oh, I work with your former coworkers. And last week I heard them laughing about how they did this. Eventually something's going to turn up.
I got a comment here from my friend Lori Fetters here. Hey, Lori, she said, have you reached out for legal or support from any organizations?
Definitely open to, organizations or people I could reach out to. I did privately retain an attorney and have been looking at, that route. Have been actually in the process of going through an EEOC case proceeding relating to this. But other than that, I haven't really done much, mainly just because I haven't known what to do. That and I guess my first focus was kind of getting myself, safe and sort of getting, my life and myself kind of back together, getting myself back in school.
Did they
Because
offer you any type of like paid leave or any type of like maybe mental health counseling after
that
this
would have
incident?
been great. After basically going back and forth with HR, I finally got them to give me 3 additional days of PTO, which really didn't make up for the week that I had to take after the robbery, which, I guess I didn't have to take that long, but I had a giant black eye, so they weren't going to want me to show up to work either and, tell everyone where that came from.
Yeah, there's not going to be a good story behind that, no matter what you say.
Well, I was gonna say, I guess maybe they didn't care because when my coworker assaulted me in December, I did work for about a month with my arm in a sling and my other arm all bandaged up. And, patients all day asking me what happened and me having to make up some story about being clumsy while, the person that did that to me was 2
Right,
registers over giving me death glares.
right, right. I fell. I
Yeah.
ran into a tree branch. Yeah, boy, that's fucking rough, Kate. Um, let me ask you this. I just, for some reason, I got this question in my head. Like, if Ben Kovler was watching this interview,
And
what would you say? What would you say to him?
honestly, do better. I think that's really the gist of it. Like, obviously, I would love like an apology or something, I guess, on some level, but like, my experience is already had and done. Like, what I really want is just for him to do better, to, up the security for dispensaries, have good emergency action plans in place, train people on them annually, run drills, give your employees the tools they need to actually survive something like this and survive it with, minimal injuries. And when someone does go through something like this, you need to provide support for them afterwards. Making someone work someplace where they were, attacked and had to fight off someone basically trying to sexually assault them in the bathroom, like that's just not a situation you should ever expect your employees to be in. Maybe I think highly of myself, but I was a really awesome, loyal employee who, loved the company and wanted to, contribute things and, do everything I could to make the cannabis industry better. And I'm going to keep making the cannabis industry better, but, you need to do better and you need to protect people, and hopefully you won't lose out on any more awesome employees who care about your company. But like either way, just do right by people. Don't put someone in a situation where they're in danger and it never occurred to me that working in a dispensary something like this could happen. And I guess maybe I was young and naive, but when your dispensaries mostly employ people that are, young and hopeful and love cannabis, like don't take advantage of that. Keep them safe because they care about your patients and you should care about them.
How old are you, Kate? I forgot to ask.
I just turned 30.
Okay.
I was in my late 20s, I guess, when all of this happened.
I hope Ben heard that. I tried to message Ben a couple times. I don't think he wants to talk to me, but Ben, if you want to come on the show and apologize, maybe I'm here for it, buddy.
I mean, I'm willing to talk. I don't hate anyone. Like I said, I just want them to do better. So I hope, maybe this can be a learning experience for everyone. I, would have preferred this not happen, but since it did, I think, it needs to be talked about.
I agree. And, I feel like this is some stuff that maybe should be addressed also at the legislative level, and,
Sure.
when executives don't take care of their employees, it's like, I don't know.
Well,
try some other avenues or something. Yeah.
OSHA involved. OSHA, is taking the stance of like, oh, cannabis is bad and, hands off. There's a couple states, really Colorado, California, Oregon. Those are the places in Washington state where where OSHA has actually released cannabis specific guidelines. So they've come in and said, we are involved in the cannabis industry, here's some of how it applies. So it's starting to happen, but overall, I'm sure you're aware OSHA became involved with Trulieve, I guess, a year or so ago when they had the first documented cannabis worker death. But that's the first time OSHA's really taken a super active role. That's kind of what prompted a lot of these state, I think, OSHA programs. So I think they really need to get more involved. There are over 400,000 people working in the cannabis industry. It's not some small little, garage ma and pop thing that you can just ignore. This is a major production industry across the country. And, the federal government dragging their heels and not getting involved because of the federal legality. OSHA's basically just endangering a lot of people. They need to get in here and start enforcing rules on these cannabis companies. Quite frankly, a lot of whom think that OSHA doesn't apply to them. So, I think OSHA is a big player we need. But, if they think, they're too, I guess, cool for cannabis because of the whole federal illegality, then maybe we do need, action on a state level. I keep hoping that some sort of safe banking will pass or something will change where, dispensaries won't have so much cash on hand. But obviously, the recent Visa and MasterCard decision, just made that worse. Kind of the feedback I keep getting is we're not going to get any change in the banking policies. And even if we did, a lot of these companies are going to operate cash heavy still on the dispensary side, just from a legacy standpoint. So I think at this point, we really do need to start looking at, legislation that protects people at work. And if OSHA won't do that, then maybe we need to add that to state cannabis programs because quite honestly, you know, if you're going to lead people with several $100,000 in cash, you need to have adequate security in place. And not doing so is just kind of, I don't know, not okay. Like, you wouldn't like force your employees to sit in the middle of like, you know, a highway and just hope they don't get hit. Like, seems kind of like the same idea.
You gotta laugh at me there, Kate. I want to chime in with this. This is another one from Lori. She said maybe check the law on being left alone at work. She says most banks and stores have a policy no one is in a business alone. That'd be interesting. I don't know anything about that, Lori, but
yeah. I will say that it's something GTI did change after this, so I would hope that's not still an ongoing practice, but maybe there's something I could do about the fact that, you know, that was ever a thing in the first place. Especially considering, you know, I had been concerned specifically with being left alone with the person who assaulted me. She probably shouldn't be the only supervisor with someone that's already beat you up, even if it happened off site, you know, doesn't really.
Yeah, that doesn't excuse it.
Yeah.
Also, I want to throw this one up there, Andy Lemke. Kate, you're a badass. I love your work. Keep the positivity. It also says OSHA and other federal agencies seem flawed. And I want to comment on this too, because you mentioned the case in Massachusetts. And I know Mike Crawford has talked about this a lot. And it sounded like you went on his show for a minute. Yeah. So the OSHA fines that came down for that death originally were about $36,000, if I recall, 34 maybe. And then it got reduced to like $19,000. And then it got reduced again to like 9,000 or something. It was ridiculous. It was like, what's the point of having these fines if you're just like, well, we'll cut them down to like 25%, like, and we'll call that the cost of a human life.
Honestly, I was pleasantly surprised to see they got any fines to stick at all. It seems like that's pretty standard for OSHA. You know, I was in the safety position I had pretty briefly, but I had the joy of walking into a position where I had 3 OSHA complaints on my desk like week 1. And I was just like, oh, what job did I agree to? You know, it already comes with issues. So a lot of what I did in that time was honestly just address OSHA complaints. And I mean, it does take a lot of documentation and work to make them go away, but normally companies kind of have the advantage in doing so, I'd say.
And most people I've talked to about OSHA seem to tell me some sort of version of this story where they give you a 24-hour heads up or something before they're coming. They're like, hey, by the way, we're coming for a surprise inspection tomorrow. Like, yeah. Okay, now we can hide all the shit.
Yeah, my understanding is usually you have to kind of get on their bad side. You know, like I said, my OSHA experience is somewhat minimal, but, you know, I have kind of heard you know, if you kind of work with the agents and you have a good relationship with them, they're definitely less likely to, you know, show up at your doorstep. That being said, you know, anytime there's like a major death or an accident or something like that, they have to, you know, show up and investigate that. But, you know, I'd also venture to say that probably almost no cannabis companies are reporting anything like that, except for, you know, maybe this one case where they had an actual death. You know, you're supposed to report like any really major injury to OSHA. And I don't see that happening.
Damn.
You know, and part of it's OSHA's fault. They don't want to enforce it. They don't want to do anything about it. And companies think that, quite honestly, they don't care. But we should get like every other business where, you know, everyone has a program where they record and they follow these incidents, you know, and figure out how to prevent them. And I know I saw some cannabis companies, you know, recently hiring for like health and safety positions. But that seems like a recent trend within the last maybe 2 years or so. And I think we need a lot more of that because I think there's a lot of unsafe things. You know, this is my experience with what's unsafe on the dispensary side. But we could probably do a whole show. I know we talked a little bit about the grassroots stuff, but there are all kinds of stories I have to tell from there too. And there are definitely some, occupational health hazards on the process side, and on the growth side. And I feel like all of that really needs to be addressed. Like,
Yeah, I've seen manufacturing. I've seen a couple of stories about explosions. I feel like those were maybe truly stories, but you get explosions. You got people breathing in this dust, or maybe like pesticides in the air, or mold, or whatever. And then you've got the whole retail end where you might get robbed or get assaulted. There's and really just hanging your employees out to dry. To me, sort of. Is just another great example of really, people were told these were going to be good paying jobs in this burgeoning new, worldwide industry, and they're paying you $16 an hour to get beat up and robbed, and they're not training you properly. And it seems like it's like that meme where it's like what you ordered versus what you got from something like that. Is how it feels to me as a onlooker.
For sure. And I think, especially a lot of these big MSOs do kind of prey on, young, hopeful, I say 20s, but, there's people of all ages too. I've definitely seen, the older folks that are, this is their second job, or, they've always wanted to work in cannabis and they'll leave what they're doing to come join the industry. But I think MSOs in particular have kind of this model of, kind of preying on these, young, hopeful cannabis enthusiasts. You're like 25 and you think that, cannabis is awesome and it's going to change the world and you can help all of these people. And, a lot of those things may be true. But, they kind of, I feel like, sort of hijack that, love of cannabis and love for this movement and just sort of turn it into slave labor. And, it'd be one thing if employees were being protected and enriched and given opportunities, but it's kind of like, they use you up and then there's, someone else to take your place if you don't do what they want. I worked all through the pandemic when we were super short staffed and, it was a dangerous job that, wasn't necessarily ideal. I really thought GTI would, kind of do right by me. And I'm sure it's nothing personal. I'm sure they would have treated anyone else the same way, but it just,
That's kind of the issue I have with these companies. It's never personal. There's no personal connection with the people that are helping them make money. Like I've worked for I've bartended at some corporate ski resorts and stuff. At the end of the day, when they're done with you or you do something they don't like, it's fucking bye. It's not like, oh, wait, this guy did a ton of work for us and, really like busts his ass and does a good job. And maybe we should like cut him a break or like pay him more money. It's like, nope, bye. We'll bring in the next sucker and let them fucking stick it out for as long as they can. And then there's another one. And boy, it's kind of a sad thing, especially in the cannabis community where it's so much about, like, in my opinion, like camaraderie and like sharing and, just like, positive things. And now it's just sort of, it feels, I don't know. It's like vampiric, like they've sucked all the fun out of it.
It's kind of been taken over by corporate interests. And I don't know, I try to remain hopeful that, the good people that, really love this plan and that, really want to, do the right thing for, patients and consumers alike will kind of win out. But fortunately, certain companies have a lot of power and control and aren't really going anywhere. So at a certain point, it's like, how do we, create regulations that will, just keep people safe? Because, people shouldn't go get a job that they think is like a fun, part-time job for $16 an hour and have their life, messed up several years later. And not that, my life is horrible. I've certainly, I guess, done things and had good things happen, but, I'm still dealing with the impact of this. And it just,
I've been robbed before. I used to sell weed in college. I got robbed at gunpoint for 2 pounds of weed, and I had bad dreams about that forever. There's no physical assault or anything, but I had like my girlfriend was in the room. A bunch of I brought a bunch of my friends in the room in case this guy tried to get weird.
Yeah.
And we had some baseball bats and some knives stashed around the room, and he pulled out a gun, and we were all like, "Ah, fuck!" And yeah, it's traumatic, man. It
Yeah.
it gets inside your head, and suddenly you start looking at people weird, and you had developed some trust issues, maybe if you're like me at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's, been a little hard for me. I'm sure I'll get past it, but, I was living in Maryland by myself, and when I kind of befriended these coworkers and moved in with them, it definitely was scary for me. I feel like, now there's definitely a certain part of me that's like, can I trust anyone? Or, will they send people into my job to attack me?
right.
Um, which probably most people won't, but it only takes one.
Yeah, and hey, yeah, that's how I definitely had a little PTSD from that shit. Just having someone stick a gun in your face, it's like, oh boy, like this escalated quick, and it's like, okay, I just like, here, take the weed, please don't fucking hurt anybody. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, and he did, luckily, but boy, it was fucking scary, man. Lori, we got one more from Lori. Great to hear your experience and keep speaking out. Caleb is going to go forward with this, I know. Do you know, Lori? Shit, I didn't know. I hope your hard work makes change for others. I also hope that.
Thank you.
Uh, um, is there anything? I got a couple of questions. I wanted to leave on kind of like a positive note and maybe ask you about the Ganjier program. But is there anything? Is there anything super pressing that we may have glossed over in that stuff that you want to touch on before we move on to something a little more heartwarming?
I think I got most of it. I guess the only thing is just, anyone that, heard this and also can relate, please reach out to me. I've kind of been looking to talk to other people that have maybe been through similar experiences if they're willing to open up, even if it's anonymously or, they don't want to like share, they just want to chat. I think it's important we start to bring together people that have, been through something like this, so we can actually get something done about it. And I'm trying to kind of put together a like policy based project, working with an organization to do something like that. For grad school, I have a like capstone project coming up. So I have to find a partner or industry partner of some sort to work with for it. But we're supposed to basically do like educating about cannabis or cannabis policy. So I really want to try to tackle this like occupational safety issue head on, and try to get some policy changes on that, possibly as part of this project. So looking for organizations to work with for that within maybe like the next week or so. So definitely, I've considered like reaching out to OSHA directly. I don't know that they'll work with me. But unions, I guess, any company that, just wants to talk, uh, dispensary security or something like that. Pretty flexible and open-minded, but I'm really trying to, do some sort of project to like get some policy moving forward on this. So kind of just putting that hook out there. If anyone has any connections, I would love to find a cool industry partner that can kind of help me make this into a grad school project. So I think then I
Cool.
can actually get some traction on it.
Word up. Yeah, and we only got one guy watching, but I will slap this up everywhere, and I will certainly, if I run into anyone like that, I will definitely send them in your direction.
Awesome. Thank you.
And one more from this guy, Andy Lemke. Guys hear about CCC in Massachusetts pushing the chair out of office. Andy, I have been hearing something. I don't know what's going on down there. I actually have Shannon O'Brien lined up for an interview next Thursday on the 21st, so maybe we can find out about that. But I don't know, man. It seemed like I don't know. I have seen a couple stories about it, and it seemed confusing. And I don't know. So I'm going to refrain from commenting on that. But thank you for tuning in, man. I appreciate it. Yeah. So I thought we'd leave on like a little more bubbly note because like I
Sure.
posted and I'm gonna do one more shameless plug for you here. It's Cate Orman here, certified Ganjier, former GTI employee, occupational safety in the cannabis industry. Yeah, and I posted that earlier on my Instagram, and it started apparently a heated debate about the Ganjier program, and I
Oh,
don't really, I don't, yeah, I don't really know anything about. I actually have one guy up here in Vermont who says two of his friends actually were the ones that started the Ganjier program in California. So he like, so we've got some different opinions, and I'd like to hear how like how does it go down? How long is it? What do they teach you? And yeah, does it cost money? Do you got to pay to do it?
yeah, it did cost a pretty chunk of change. I definitely used some family money. I got like a trust fund payout that I kind of invested in it, which for me was a really good choice. I feel like it was honestly exactly what I needed when I did it. Basically, you do like an online training course. I want to say it's like 36 hours, 60 something. I don't know. I'm bad with numbers. But it's like hours of video material you watch, review, take quizzes. And then there is a 2-day live training. So you actually go to their campus in Humboldt, which was definitely my favorite part. Had never been to, that area of the country. I actually paid to, like rent a spot there and just like kind of went down, spent a few days just, doing the program and just kind of enjoying the beautiful scenery. There was all the redwoods and beaches. If you've never been there, it's honestly to me one of the most magical places I've ever been. You should definitely go. But just really awesome to kind of get away from everything, go to this Ganjier campus, kind of learn about the plant, hands on. Lots of, experts that have kind of been in like California doing their thing for 20 years or so. So I just
When was this that you did the program?
so I did this in June and then I went back this July to take my test.
Oh, June. Okay, cool. So you've been out there
Really
twice.
recently. Yeah.
Cool.
So 2 different trips out there. For me, it ended up being kind of something I did sort of to get myself in the right headspace to do grad school again. I was just kind of really having a hard time getting back in my program. I had started that program in like 2020 while working at Rise, but then after the robbery, I kind of took a few classes here and there, but really couldn't, just kind of stay on track and keep up with it. So ended up just kind of taking a leave of absence. So I was ready to do that, but just like really nervous about being back in grad school. Kind of decided the Ganjier would be a good, kind of more fun training for me to do first. And I felt like it really complemented, my grad school education well. My grad school programs through the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy, it's all very, medical and very like hands off with the plant. So Ganjier was kind of the exact opposite. It was like, here, smell this. So I feel like I kind of got a little bit of, education from both. And I'm hoping, that'll make me, more well rounded in this industry. But definitely just, love the Ganjier experience. I got to network with a bunch of really cool people. And I don't know, to me, there's something kind of magical about just like seeing that history and kind of knowing, where everyone's cannabis was grown for like probably 30 years or so.
So do you fly out there and they have like a farm or something where they already have a bunch of stuff you can taste, or do they like bring you stuff from dispensaries to try, or
So they have a property, which was a really cool spot, actually. It was like an old dojo they bought. So it's formerly like a martial arts training dojo, and it's built with like all sorts of like calming symmetry and fun stuff like that. Had neat buildings, just a really pretty place with very good energy. You go out kind of to their like training, I guess, dojo camp, and you do like a lot of it's assessment based. So they're teaching you how to basically look at different samples and evaluate them for like color, texture, taste, experience. So kind of all different aspects. So there is some hands-on, they'll give you samples and you'll be, working through their assessment process together. They also teach you like customer service and like basic, dispensary skills. There's basically 3 exams you take. There's a written exam that includes all sorts of information on, history, botany, cannabis chemistry, kind of every subject from the videos. That's like a written test. And then they have you do like a service test, which basically is kind of testing you talking like a patient or a customer through like a product sale type experience. And then they test you on like the evaluation. So they give you a sample and you have to evaluate that sample. And then your answers have to be basically within so many points of their counsel who's also evaluated that sample.
I was
So
going to say, what happens if you fail one of the tests? Do they let you retake it?
So yeah, you get to retake like one test, I guess, or when I took it, they would let you retake all of them if you needed to. But I believe moving forward, you're just going to be able to retake one, was what they said. But like pretty much you run the risk of going out there, taking the exam and not passing. We definitely had people in our group that didn't pass, which I was sad for them because some of them were even here from like out of country. I was coming from Portland, so it was an 8-hour drive. It was, a commitment, but definitely not like flying in internationally or anything. That's actually why I went twice. They advise you not to like take it all in one. Like it's really tempting to make one trip, do the training, and then do the exam. They definitely recommend against that. So I ended up doing the training, coming home for a month, and then doing the exam, thinking I would study in that time. Honestly, I really didn't, but I still passed my exams. So
I've been studying.
Yeah, that counts.
I study every day.
I'm like buying back to school supplies, and I'm like, oh look, I need this bong. It's for back to school.
And is it like the same people when you went back out that were there the first time?
It was different people just because I went back a month later. Like a lot
different teachers? Is it the same teachers?
Oh yeah, the same teachers, just like different students, registered for different dates.
Cate, I'm pretty much out of shit here. I've come down to the end of my list, which is always when I say thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing. I'm sure that some of this stuff is not super fun to talk about, but I'm honored that you reached out to me, and I'm happy to give you a space to speak about it. And I'm sure we could do a follow-up in the future and do another 2 hours here and talk about this woman who got arrested in Maryland. Hold up, let me slap that up real quick. You told me about this, and for anybody who watches my fraud stuff, this would be right up your alley. We got this. Oh, where'd it go? Oh, you son of a bitch. This ex-Maryland lawmaker gets 2 years in prison for bribery case.
They named the commission after her mother too. Like literally the commission was named in her honor.
Well, thank you for the heads up on that one. I just wanted to pop that up at last minute. So yeah, I'm out of shit. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing. And if you have any shameless plugs or shout outs or anything we missed that you want to send out, now is your time. It's been a pleasure, Cate.
I think I'm good. Thank you very much, Caleb. I appreciate you, giving me this platform. And anyone that, watched this show and wants to chat, please reach out. This is just me getting started. I'm going to keep talking about this and keep bothering lawmakers. So I'd love your help if that's something you're into.
I love bothering people.
Sometimes it's the best way.
It's been a pleasure, Cate. Cate Orman, former GTI employee, occupational safety and health in cannabis industry. I am your host, Caleb Teskey. reminding you that the devil is in the details and the details are in the fine print. Peace.